I cannot figure out who Dodge made this thing for. It has 475 horsepower, 470 pound-feet of torque from a 6.2 liter Hemi V8, 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds, yet it seats 6 comfortably. Can you imagine 6 people screaming at the top of their lungs at the same time? And on top of all of that, if that wasn't enough, it sounds like this. This is going to be an interesting one. Let's get started. In a world that is pushing more and more towards conserving energy, a world where the Mustang nameplate is used on an electric SUV, Dodge has decided to go a different direction. Literally in the opposite direction. They decided we're going to keep the oil companies in business for the next 100 years by producing models such as this one. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Adam Drives LA. My name is Adam, and today we have a 2021 Dodge Durango SRT 392. Now, I have been driving this thing around for a couple of days, and one thing that I still can't figure out is who is the target demographic? Who do they expect to buy this thing? I can't figure it out, so we're going to figure this thing out together by going over the exterior design, the interior features, and of course the drive. Now, before we get started, if you could do me a big favor, scroll down, hit the like button. Very easy for you, very helpful for me. With that said, let's start talking about the design. Now, the Dodge Durango has never been a very attractive truck. To me, it's always been such a bulky and big and overwhelming truck. It always looked dated, never looked like it had any modern features, modern design cues, or any of that. Although that's partially still true, the 2021 model year has made some cool changes. First off, these totally redesigned headlights. Now it's really starting to look like a raised Charger, especially with this grille. The SRT badge, of course, up front stands for street racing technology. You've got real vents all over. Now, they can't save money and put fake vents. They have to put real ones because this has that 6.2 liter Hemi V8, so all the cooling you can get, you need to utilize it. As we wrap around, you're gonna notice a few things. First, that paint color is gorgeous. Look at it up close, the flakes. I mean, this is the most beautiful white truck I have ever seen. These hood vents, these are absolutely real, totally functional. As I said, they need all the cooling they can get. These wheels, absolutely gorgeous. It matches this thing so well. The size, the color, all of it. Behind it, you'll notice the massive Brembo brakes with the SRT badge written over it. As we wrap around the side, you're gonna see again, the flakes on that paint just shine so much. The sun is directly in front of me and I'm seeing it just glistening all over. The rear, you'll notice they dropped this third window ever so slightly to give it this idea that it's not so high up, but being a white truck, the rest of this body really stands out. And as we step away, you'll notice that is the absolute tallest part of this thing is that rear end. It's not an attractive thing, but to have 3 rows, you absolutely need to raise up that end to give the third row passengers some headroom. Back here, this probably is the ugliest portion of the truck. These are massive taillights, and I thought they would modernize and make them smaller, but the problem is the smaller you make the taillights, the bigger the car looks overall. So they're stuck with the same looking taillights as they have in previous generations. Don't like it. Now, as you go down, you'll notice the exhaust pipes, which sound amazing, the SRT badge, and everything else that we need to talk about is inside. So let's jump right in. All right, first thing we do, we're gonna hit this nice red push to start button. And as this loads up, remember I did just post a video of the 2021 Jeep Grand Cherokee L. This shares a lot of the infotainment, especially it's the same Uconnect with a few other features. It has the SRT and all of that. So we'll go through some things, but not everything, because I've already gone in depth in my Jeep Grand Cherokee L review. I will link that below in the description of this video. So let's get started. Well, first thing, let's ignore that check engine light up there. That's been on since I've had the car, so we're gonna ignore that. On the left side, you'll notice your actual speed gauge is analog. That has a physical piece that moves. On the far right, again, physical needles for the oil temperature and your fuel level. Now in the center, your tachometer, that is an entirely digital gauge. As I rev up the car, you'll notice it's actually a little bit laggy. I don't like it, and you'll notice as we go through a few things, it's not as responsive as you would like, especially for the most important gauge of them all, the tachometer. For a performance car, you do need that to be lightning fast and responsive. So one thing you notice immediately is that this is not a very high quality interior. Other than somewhat of a laggy system up front, you do have no real nice materials. Everything seems generic. This is all plastic and rubber. Even this trim here, it's not real metal. It doesn't get warm or cold to the touch. Here we're missing a wood trim that would probably be on a higher end model. Remember, there is still an SRT Hellcat that has over 700 horsepower. We're not even going to get into that. The rest of the interior, again, no real nice materials. There's no wood here, no metal. The handle feels pretty cheap. It's a little bit disappointing, but this is what the Dodge Durango sort of always was to me. It's this large, massive thing that you would get instead of a minivan, so you still have an SUV. Some of the materials down here and the design is a little bit better. First thing I'm going to talk about, let's get into the Uconnect system. Now, as I said, I've already gone in depth into this 5th generation Uconnect system in my Jeep Grand Cherokee L review. That is linked in the description of this one, but let's go over just a few of the new options. Now we're going to skip home, media, comfort, navigation, phone, skip all of that, jump right into vehicle, and it has a little SRT logo. This is the exciting stuff. Now in performance gauges, check this out. This is your timers. It checks your 60 foot. It's recording all of these as you're in your track mode. Now one thing you'll see, the previous driver, this is not me, managed to pull 13.4 at 99 miles per hour in a quarter mile. That was honestly probably done by accident on the street, not actually done at the racetrack, because this truck is much faster than that. We'll go into gauges. These are live. Check out the battery gauge and watch that oil pressure as I rev up this truck. You'll see in dyno, I'm not sure if you're going to get exact results here. This is probably pretty generic and very much approximated, but you'll see as I rev it up just how much power is being produced. This tells you your G-force. We may go into this a little bit later as we start driving. In vehicle dynamics, again, this is live. As I am turning the wheel, you will notice it is reacting there, and it tells me the degrees of the steering. And before we leave this screen, check this out. You have a little snapshot button. You click that, it'll take a screenshot of whatever you're looking at. It goes and saves into whatever device you have saved. Then you can share that image with all your other maniac friends who also drive 3-row SUVs and minivans that produce almost 500 horsepower. But going back into your SRT settings, you go into drive modes. Watch this, how cool this is. When you click on track, it'll show you everything that has changed. Obviously, your steering will stiffen up, your suspension stiffens up, stability, all of that will go into track mode, which probably means that it's turned off. When you go into sport, you'll see some things change and some things don't. You go into automatic, it tells you each part of the car, each piece of the performance metrics that will be affected. In snow, of course, more, and you'll see your all-wheel drive is exactly 50-50. That's perfect. That's what you're looking for in snow. In towing, you have your information, and you do know that this thing can tow a whopping 8,700 pounds. In custom, you can go in here and create your own setting through custom setup. Now moving down from here, you have a bunch of your physical buttons and your knobs that you absolutely need, mostly for your infotainment control and for your climate controls. Below it, check this out, you've got your SRT button. That brings you back to that screen that we were just on. Once you get rid of it, look at the button next to it. How ridiculous. You have launch mode, and it'll set you up ready for launch. You'll see your traction just turned off, all the other things that's affected, and it all shows here who is launching this thing. You're gonna have 6 passengers screaming at the top of their lungs. So let's go a little bit lower. You have your USB and USB-Cs, you have your wireless charging pad, some storage space here, and now the worst part of this interior is this gear selector. I hate it. This, what we used to see in the 90s and the 2000s in all Dodge and Chrysler products, this just reminds me of that. I mean, you just cover that digital part of it, and this looks like straight out of the 90s. I hate it. We're so used to, you know, little dials or buttons or like a simple lever, not this thing something that's the size of my entire hand. We don't need it that way anymore. Here are your cup holders, you got some storage here, and you've got this absolutely atrocious fake carbon fiber. Now, as we back up and get into that second row, you'll notice I'm a taller guy. I have a ton of space for my legs, ton of headroom. Speaking of headroom, look up here. I do have dials up here for our second rows, personalized climate controls. Again, those seats are gorgeous with the SRT stitching in them for the second row. It's a little bit ridiculous to look at, but we do have them. It feels sporty. Down here, you have a pretty simple setup, just a couple of USBs and your vents. You do have heated seats on both of these captain's chairs. You've got a little bit of storage down here, and of course, as the step comes up, you move into the third row. Now, these are generally not extremely roomy. They are meant for children or for certain uses, not every day, not for grown adults to sit back there all the time and during road trips, just for certain times. So we do excuse that they're not the most roomy. They are there, and we're gonna get into the trunk to show you that this is extremely practical, even with that third row. You'll notice, although there's a bunch of stuff in here, there is plenty of room back here, even with that third row up. Of course, you can fold them completely flat like we did on the Grand Cherokee, and there is storage underneath. But you can see this thing is very useful, and of course, because of that odd shape back here, that's what makes it practical. Otherwise, we would have a cool looking but non-functioning SUV. All right, now that we've discussed the exterior design, the interior features, and everything there is to know about the new 2021 Dodge Durango SRT 392, I think it's time for the part everybody's been waiting for, and that is the drive. Let's see how this thing accelerates, how it sounds, and every other feeling you get from the driver's seat. If you enjoy these types of quick reviews, I invite you to scroll down and subscribe to my channel. I see a lot of my views come from people who are not subscribed. It greatly helps me more than you'll know to have every single subscriber, and you will be getting an awesome car review every week. With that said, let's jump in and see how this thing drives. All right, first things first, don't act like you don't know what's the first thing I'm gonna do here. Okay, all right, let me tell you a few things. First off, I hope you're gonna hear me do this because this thing is insanely loud, and I'm not even in sport mode, okay? In sport mode, I can feel that the camera is trembling and it's just not gonna pick it up. First thing is, this thing makes a lot more noise than it should. I mean, it's fast, it's definitely fast, especially, you know, off the line, and it's all-wheel drive. But it really is louder and shakier than it is fast. It just doesn't match up. This thing is just so ridiculous. I mean, who is buying this thing? Am I gonna be a dad looking back to yell at my 4 kids who are screaming and telling them to keep their voice down while I see the SRT badges on the rear seats? It just doesn't make any sense, especially when you consider 6 seats, okay, 3 rows. Generally means the last row is reserved for people who have more than average children, so they have like 3 or 4 kids, or you have your parents back there, which would be grandparents. Like, who is back there that's enjoying almost 500 horsepower in like a minivan? The answer is nobody. Only the driver and maybe the passenger up front are the only ones enjoying that kind of power in a truck this big. I mean, the people back there are probably too busy, seasick, and asking me to pull over so they can vomit. I'm the only one that's really enjoying this. So you can see that this thing was pretty much made for people who never really grew up, and that's not an insult. Think of it this way. It's like when you were a kid and you saw a big truck, you're fascinated by it, right? But you're also fascinated by things that go fast, and generally a big truck and fast don't go together. Well, this thing defies physics. Yes, a big massive truck does go that fast, so it's built for the kid in all of us. And even the seats, especially the ones up front, even the captain's chairs, they're a little bit tighter than you would expect any other chair because this has that kind of power, but they're not like bucket seats. These up front, really, they hug you, your shoulders, your hips, everything, almost like having a bucket seat, but it's not that discomfort that you get from a bucket seat. It's just sports seats, and honestly they're great. They have the Alcantara in the middle, or it's suede, one of the two, but it feels good, it looks good, especially that all black interior inside this gorgeous pearl white exterior. Now let's talk price. These things started around $65,000. Now whether or not it's worth it is going to come down to one factor and one factor alone, and it's just like the people who buy a Hellcat. You're not going to get the best sedan with a Hellcat, you're not going to get the nicest sedan, you're simply going to get the fastest sedan at that price. So do you want the fastest SUV at that price? You're not going to get a lot of the luxury you expect at a $65,000 price point. You do get 3 rows, you do get immense power. So is that what you're looking for? Because there is a lot of competition at $65,000 in this range of, you know, these large SUVs with 3 rows, but you're really going to be stuck with choosing between either a nice minivan or an SUV that just does not have the same level of power as this. For $65,000, this is a lot of car, a lot of interior, a ton of space. You just get so much out of it for $65,000 that if you're willing to put up with the downsides, you have one major upside, and that is you can go full throttle from 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds and drive this thing 300-400 miles, seating 6 people comfortably. Now personally, I cannot see myself ever owning one of these, even if I have a family and I need the space for 6 people, because that's generally going to mean I have children back there, and when you have children in a car, you don't necessarily need 500 horsepower. You can make the argument that it's one car that does it all, so you have something that can haul 6 people comfortably and you have the power. But I still think if I'm at a $65,000 price point, I can easily for $20,000 get myself a cool sports car, get yourself a used Corvette. There are a bunch of Mustangs, an S2000, an M3. You can get so many things, and I think at $65,000 you probably are at a point where you can afford something else on the side. I don't need everything in one package like this one is. Now if you disagree or if you agree, let me know in the comments what you think about this thing. I think it's the most ridiculous car I've ever driven, for that simple fact of how much power it has and for it being somewhat of a minivan. Now with all that said, it's going to wrap up yet another review. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next car.